Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am Vered Kogan, your host, and I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to introduce Kathy Dempsey to you. Kathy is the president of Keep Shedding Incorporated, as well as being an award-winning author, keynote speaker, and change expert. She is the founder of the Shedding Revolution, which ignites people and organizations with practical skills, knowledge, and supportive accountability to embrace and celebrate change. In fact, over 1 million people from Fortune 500 and healthcare companies are utilizing the revolutionary shedding philosophy to create change-ready organizations. Kathy is also the author of 8 books. Her most popular one, Shed or You're Dead, 31 Unconventional Strategies for Change and Growth, is the recipient of an International Book Award. Kathy is also a contributing author for 2 of the best-selling Chicken Soup for the Soul series. As a former hospital executive, Kathy led Memorial Healthcare System's organizational development efforts to become one of the top 100 hospitals in America. Now, on a personal note, I'm deeply grateful to say Kathy is a friend. We met at the National Speakers Association several years ago. We've had a chance to meet outside of that, and I've had a chance to get to know her a little bit and just see what a wonderful human being she is. So, Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm excited about being here and I appreciate the invite. And it's just great to be on this call with you. I loved it when you contacted me about mindset because that is so huge, so huge. And the listeners hopefully will benefit with 1 or 2 things in our time together that they can take back and immediately implement in their work and their life.
Well, I'm absolutely certain of that. And would you be willing to start us off by sharing, how did you get into doing this beautiful work that you're now doing?
Wow. Wow. Well, I started out my career as an ER trauma nurse back in the 80s, and I had a pretty significant um, incident that happened where I had a blood to cut exposure to a patient, trauma patient that ended up dying. And unfortunately, this guy had AIDS. And so the CDC started testing me at that point in time. And unfortunately, after a few months, some of these tests started coming back positive, and the confirmatory test came back positive. And at the time, I don't know if you remember, some of you probably aren't even that old, or were born in the mid 80s, but people didn't even know what was going on. It was kind of like COVID started out, we don't even know how you catch it and all these things, but we knew people were dying pretty quickly. And it was like a death sentence that people were experiencing. So I was taken off my job. People said if the community found out that we have a nurse who has HIV, this hospital shut down. Unfortunately, the church rejected me. They thought it was AIDS God's punishment. My friends, and I think it was more a fear, as some of you probably experience as we're going through this pandemic situation. There's a lot of fear and we just don't know. And so I wasn't really doing well with this. And the CDC was about to break the news, and, like the poster child for HIV/AIDS. And so I wasn't coping well. I wasn't using shed skills if I would have known of them. But I wasn't eating well. I wasn't sleeping well. I was just obsessing. We do that in our mind over and over and over and over, obsessing about my demise. And so I ended up in a car in a hotel parking lot, and I'm like, I'm not going to die this way. I'm like 25 years old. And so I had the pills in my hand, the sleeping pills, and this woman knocked on my car door window and said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No." And this woman got in the car and she helped me through the night and helped me get through. And what I call was divine intervention, Kathy, we're not finished with you yet. And so got me through that night. And fast forward to tell you that months and months later, the CDC called and the doctors called and said, we have no explanation. But all these tests, all 8 of your tests, every confirmatory test, everything's negative. And they had no explanation for why or how, but it was in my mid-20s a wake-up call. I mean, a big wake-up call, over the head, hello. And, I just made the commitment that I wasn't going to live my life the same way again. And so that started me off on this journey, on this path. And, I was very, very ashamed about even telling this story to anybody for 12 years. And then, as you mentioned, NSA. And when I got there, they said, you need to tell your story. And I'm like, what? And so that story has just helped thousands and thousands of people as a catalyst to vicariously live through that so they can walk out and do something different in their lives and not have as many regrets and maybe make some changes in their lives. And so, fast forward into the 90s is when I began to really feel like I was called to speak and share this message. And, it started out with grief and loss. But there was something else that was planned. I got this download from above where this friend of mine, I was working in the hospital still, and my friend David's lizard died. And I just joke with him, like, what happened? And he said, it didn't shed its skin, Kathy. I'm like, what? And he says, yeah, that's how lizards grow. They shed their skin, and if they don't, they die. I said, wow. I said, David, what can we learn as humans from the lizard? And he says, Kathy, we grow physically and mentally and spiritually. And if we don't shed, if we don't grow, we die. And all of a sudden it was like, whoo, light bulb from above, shed or you're dead. And I thought, how true. How true. So that's how my little mascot, Lenny the Lizard, was birthed on July 29th, 1998. And he's been my partner now for 23 years. So he's getting old, but wiser. And so that's really how the whole shedding launched itself. And the shedding revolution is to help people personally, professionally shed whatever is holding them back in life. And it's a really a 2-part process. The first is letting go of the old, all those things that don't serve you anymore. They may have once, but they don't anymore. And the second part of shedding is to embrace the new. What are those new things? Those new things at work, the new programs, the new mergers, the new policies, the new skills, the new knowledge that's going to help move you forward.
So first of all, thank you for sharing that very powerful story, because it just demonstrates, first of all, the word hope. No matter how bleak things may be, that perhaps, what if, right? There's something else out there for us that we're kind of being guided towards, and being willing to listen to that voice and take action on it, as you did, both, with the, experience with the woman who helped you all those years ago, and the experience with your friend with the lizard, right? You got that download and you took action on it,
right,
in service of others. And so you mentioned these 2 steps, and my sense is that some of the people listening are thinking, yes, that makes total sense. I want to shed. I probably have lots of stuff I need to shed, right? Like a whole list, right? So how do I begin by identifying what is the most important stuff for me to shed, and then to actually shed it? What do we do?
Right, right, right. Well, that's a huge question, and it's individualistic for each person. Some people have come up to me afterwards and said, "I need to shed stuff in my house. I just got stuff. I got way too much stuff. Stuff, 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 stuff. I need to shed stuff." And I'm like, great. And I'll hear an email from them and they're like, man, I took like 50 boxes to the Goodwill and I am now, my house is in order. And then somebody's just, I just shed my junk drawer. And I'm like, whoa, we all got those junk drawers. And then, some people will say, I need to shed weight, unfortunately, the APA, American Psychological Association, put out a study yesterday that the average weight gain through this pandemic has been 29 pounds. Wow. Which, you can understand, a lot of people are isolated. A lot of people aren't getting out exercising. The gyms have been open and closed, and people have gone to sometimes more comfort food, just to deal with all this. And then some people say to me, I need to shed a toxic relationship. It's been really toxic and unhealthy, and it's not good for me, and it's holding me back. And then, I've even had people, I've had this one CEO who came up to me confidentially and said, I need to shed my job. It's time. It's time. It's hard. I've been here 25 years, but it's a big shed and I'm scared to death, but I need to do it. So it could be all of the above. But I talk to people about, just making one commitment, a little baby shed step. It could be one thing that maybe is real significant, or it could be a little thing, but just one little thing at a time is helpful, because it'll start gaining some confidence and you'll get a little bit of momentum and you'll start feeling good about yourself. And you're like, wow, if I shed that, then I could shed this. And, so it's really doing an inventory of your life of what do you need to shed? And usually people know if they go inside and spend a minute, they know what they need to shed. A lot of times they've known it for a long time. They just need to have somebody ask them and take action, as you just said.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that with us, because I imagine the listeners now are thinking, okay, what do I want to shed? And what will be different when I do that, right? What is the motivation for doing that? Because it takes energy to shed, it takes action. And so once somebody has identified whether it's weight or a material thing or relationship or an emotion or a habitual thought that's not serving them, whatever it is that they want to shed, as you said, to take some action, a mini shed, to be able to move towards and get some momentum. What if they begin to gain some momentum and then some resistance shows up or self-sabotage? What does that mean, and what, if anything, can they do?
Well, and I would say not usually if it shows up, it usually is when it shows up. I mean, for most of us, we go through it as the cycles of change. We go through that honeymoon, woo, and then we go back down and we plummet. And so it's not a like shed and boom. I mean, some people can do that. But most of us run into some roadblocks and some bumps in the road on that one. And for me, I need to first ask myself, why am I shedding? And then I want to go the why to the why. So I want to get down to the really big why. And when I get through those bumps, then I really look at the big why of why I'm doing this. One guy said to me, I said, so why do you want to shed? Well, I want to be healthier. I said, well, why do you want to be healthier? He said, because I'm young, I'm in my 40s, I'm way overweight and I want to be here for my children. I want to see them grow up. I want to see them get married. I want to see them do, that was his big why, of why he wanted to be healthier and take care of his body. So I think getting to the why and identifying that helps you get over some of those bumps. The second thing I would say about that is to have somebody to help you be accountable. Because there's three premises with shedding. First is you got to have the knowledge. Second of all, you got to have the skills. And that's what we help people with. And the third is the accountability piece. And sometimes people can do it with two of them or so, but if you got all three of those in place, that really sets you up for success. To have somebody call them like, oh, I'm having a bump in the road, help me. There's one thing I wanted to share with you, and it came out of the kids' book for shedding, dealing with hurt, that I wrote a few years ago. But it so many people, adults, say this is for us. I know we use it with our kids, but it's called emotional CPR. So if you can think about it, C would be check in with your feelings. Are you happy, sad, angry, scared? There's nothing wrong with any of those feelings. It's just most of us don't acknowledge them, and we either run away from them or we anesthetize them. But just checking in with your feelings. And then the R is to plug in and recharge, just like our cell phones. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm on a half battery, so I'm going to have to recharge my phone in a few minutes. We need to recharge our bodies, and we do it in different ways. Sometimes we do it in positive ones, and sometimes we do it in negative ones, and both of them work. But the negative ones usually have consequences. The positive ones, go for a walk, call one of your best friends, take a bike ride, take a day off. So many things that we can do to positively recharge. And the negative ones, are usually the overs, overeating, over drinking, over technology, over shopping, over, seem to work initially at the beginning, but again, long-term, they don't. And the third of the CPRs, check in with your feelings, plug in and recharge. And the third is R, rely on your 911 support team. It's kind of your advisory board. And so we help people talk about do you have an advisory board? And I remember when I first heard this from a mentor of mine, Naomi Rohde, who too, when my husband was sick and ended up dying, she goes, you need a 911 support team and advisory board. And I'm like, okay. But who is it that maybe it's your friends, and maybe it could be a counselor, it could be your pastor, your dentist, your financial planner. Some people, it's their pets, some kids, it's their stuffed animals, that they go to, that's part of their support team. And so when you're having these times where maybe you're losing your motivation or get a little down, you have that support team to reach out to help you through those difficult times.
Well, I so honor you for sharing these basic principles that are really at the heart of change. That we really need to set ourselves up for success, because as you said, it's not an if, it's a when resistance is going to show up. And
Sure.
so by setting up that accountability, recharging, being mindful of our thoughts and emotions, all of those things can really give us the support that we need to make it to the finish line.
Sure. And, when I talked about earlier about what happened to me with the AIDS scare, it's just like, how can I be 25 years old and I have no coping skills? I mean, I felt like I wasn't armed with so many of these things shedding skills. A few we're talking about today, but there's a lot more, which is what we wrote the kids book for too. Is like start them early, right? So when they get into some bumpy times, that they'll be able to help themselves and reach out and get some help too. So, one of the things I did want to mention to you, especially about this pandemic time, is over and over, my clients have talked about this forced shedding or unwanted shedding. It's like, well, I didn't want to shed my office. I didn't want to get sent home to do work at my house, and now I'm taking care of my 3 kids, and I'm supposed to be on my computer working for 8 hours a day too. And it's just, I did not want this change. I did not want it. I did not ask for it, and it's being forced upon me. And I think that's one of the things that's been the most difficult as I talk to managers, executives, leaders, staff, this past 18 months. We work with a lot of corporations, and Aetna is one of our biggest clients. And, they were just saying a few weeks ago on one of our sessions together, how helpful the shedding skills have been for them to navigate this. They said, if we hadn't had this, we wouldn't have made it through as successfully as the rest of the company. So, they've had a merger with CVS Health and lots of change. They're like, it's like playing baseball and a fastball, and you're standing up to bat and you're batting with a Q-tip.
Oh.
I mean, that's how fast the change was coming. And some of you have experienced it. I'm sure you're just like, I can't handle one more change. And yet we're having to deal with it and navigate it and help other people, either our colleagues or employees or our families, our staff, our kids, we're our friends, we're having to help other people and support them in some of this. And some of it's tragic. Some of it's like, as I was talking to some of the employees at Aetna, they're like, we've lost our family members. They've died. And the people that are calling in with the Aetna insurance, some of them have died, some of our customers. And so the loss, talking about shedding, I think one of the biggest things is shedding people that you love.
Well, I believe, as you're sharing, that any change involves loss. Some version of something needs to be shed in order to welcome the new, as you said. And what additional advice would you have to leaders who are listening now, whether it's leaders in their family, leading their children, or whether it's leaders of a team, of a large organization, in terms of how to make decisions, when you're standing there with a little Q-tip, and you don't have all the information, right. It's happening way too fast. What can you do to support yourself and your teams?
Right. And I have several answers that are coming through my brain, but one of them would just be for you and your teams to learn the 3 R's of shedding, because that has been one of the most helpful things that we've gotten feedback on. And the 3 R's are: number 1, release the attachment. We have an attachment. I have an attachment to my office, and now they're making me work out of my home. And I loved my office. I loved my colleagues. I loved working here. Just release it. Let it go. The second is to reframe the situation. So how can you see the situation from the most positive light? So when I asked the question to some of my clients, I said, well, what's been the most unexpected blessing about COVID? And they're like, wow, I realized my priorities. I realized how important relationships were. And I didn't realize that before. I just kind of took a lot of things for granted. So reframing the situation as best you can, if we can look back at things that happened to us maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we probably weren't really happy about it. But once we have some time and space, and oftentimes it takes longer than other times, we're able to say, hey, that was a blessing in disguise. When I lost my job, when I got fired, when my friend died, when my spouse died, when this happened, it ended up being huge blessing to me. So reframing the situation and helping your teams learn to reframe quicker and faster. It's almost like going to the gym and building your muscles. This is like building your shedding muscles. So a lot of teams now, when they get their unwanted shedding news, some of the managers will say, well, okay, let's take 2 minutes and see who can come up with the best reframe of the situation. Go. And so they begin to practice with their team, so they have that mindset of reframe very, very quickly, instead of going down into the negative, down into the complaining, which takes everybody down when you have that negativity in an environment. And the third R of shedding is to refocus your energy. So let go of the negative and just refocus your energy on, what do I need to do now to move forward?
Thank you. And would you be willing to say a little bit more about the release of the attachment? I think this is such an important point, because typically when we experience some suffering, if you will, what we perceive to be suffering, when we don't feel ease or any positive emotion about a change, it's when, as you said, there is an over attachment to a value or a thing or a person. We amplify the significance of that, the meaning of it, and then the body goes into fear. So
Sure.
how do we release the attachment when it's something that we deeply care about?
Sure, sure. And that can be a tough one based on the attachment. I know when my husband died about 8 years ago, I did not want to release him and let him go. And I think it isn't, I, and there's 5 stages of shedding that we can talk about more, and it's in some of the books and resources. But there's a place where you come to acceptance. It's not that you want the change to happen, but you've accepted this is reality. And so many people buck that acceptance part. So if you can think to come to situations with like a baseline of acceptance, so you might go down into loss or anger or discouragement, but come back up to acceptance. And of course, then the highest would be celebration. And what I have groups do and corporations and leaders do is we celebrate the change before it even happens. And what that does, talk about the mindset, the mind doesn't know the difference between reality and fiction. So if you keep telling the mind something, then it believes it. And so when you have a group of people together and you do what we call strategic shedding celebration, sometimes we have thousands of people in the room, and we have balloon drops and bands and cakes and CEOs and awards and all that. And people say, you're going into the future and celebrating, you won the Baldrige Award or whatever. And then we'll come back, and a few years later, they're like, oh, we did it. We did it. It's like, it's not that we didn't have bumps in the road, but the bumps went faster and quicker, and they got through them because they already had the vision. They had already celebrated it with their senses, with their eyes, with their ears, with their hands, with the, tasting the sparkling grape juice and the cake and smelling. And so once you get all the senses involved, you can create a place where you're somewhere else. You can release faster and quicker than you normally would. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I think it's brilliant. And I guess requires each of us that's going through a change to kind of say, how will I know when this has been successful, right? What am I going to see and hear and smell and
Right.
taste and touch and so on? And to really kind of go into that image or that movie and maybe even bring it into reality, as you said. It's
Yeah,
absolutely brilliant to actually celebrate. And when you do that as part of a team, everybody's experiencing those elevated emotions. And it just brings that momentum that, as you said, is going to serve us well when we hit those bumps.
sure,
So we just don't dip into the low, as low as we could, right? And we are
sure.
much more likely to be in a state of acceptance,
Yes.
and less of
Yes. And,
resistance.
and and the thing that I think is if we realize in our minds that everything is always changing. I mean, nothing is staying the same. Nothing in our bodies is staying the same. We're shedding right now like thousands of skin shells, if we had a microscope on our bodies, so everything is changing. So if we get that mindset in our head to realize that nothing is staying the same, then we're able to move through life in a way that when the change comes, we realize this is part of life. This is part we wouldn't want to be back in our mother's womb. Maybe some of us would. What the gift of that cord cutting was, wow, we got life, and then we started shedding diapers and teeth and, all this kind of stuff, which is, at the time we probably didn't like that either, but that is just so much the part of life. And so I say from birth until death, we will continue to go through a process of attachment and detachment, attachment and detachment, attachment and detachment. So, learning shedding skills, I feel like, is the number one most essential thing that you can help yourself, you can help your loved ones, you can help your teams, to be able to navigate life in the best possible way.
Oh, and it's just so beautiful to hear you share that, because I think a lot of people that might be in that place of fear or anxiety or just hopelessness, they can't quite see the way because of the attachment, and they're not quite there yet. But you've given us this hope today that there are tools, there are skills out there that we can practice, that we can, allow our body to experience more ease, more of that acceptance. And as you said, the ultimate acceptance is acceptance of change, that we're going to experience some form of pain and suffering through our life. It's just a natural progression of living, as you said.
Yes, it's part
And
of life. In fact, it's funny because during the COVID time, I said, well, a lot of my big keynotes all just, were shed. I mean, people weren't, especially big events, those were all gone, vanished within a week. Because they weren't meeting anymore. So two things came out. One was this book got written called Shed Happens. Shed Happens. And it's got a whole inventory of all the things, 72 things in life that shed could happen to you. All the way from financial difficulties to a flat tire, to health challenges, to losing your job, to, every, all these shed happens are going to happen to most of us, a good percentage of these on the list. And so if we know they're going to happen in life, why not figure out how's the best way to navigate through them? And what are those ways? And I'll just share with you two of the 7 strategies. One is to ask for help. Ask for help. And that's sometimes really, really difficult for some people, just to reach out and ask for help. Whether that be your 911 support team that we talked about earlier, or, a professional therapist or a doctor or your boss or your best friend or somebody. And the second is that I have found really important, especially this year, is to take care of yourself. Because bottom line, we don't have control. somebody asked me yesterday, I'm like, come on, you coming from healthcare? What's going to happen? I'm like, what? like I have the crystal ball on all this, but I don't have control over it. You don't have control over it, but we do have control over one thing, and that's taking care of ourselves. Exercising every day, building my immune system as strong as it possibly could, as it can be, staying healthy, staying positive. Negativity just drains energy. Being around positive people, there's so many things that we can take care of ourselves, that we have complete 100% control over.
From my heart, Kathy, thank you. You have just gifted us with so many practical, helpful strategies and just a deeper understanding of what it is to be human, and to really give ourselves and others a whole lot of love as we shed what we need to shed, because we're all a part of this shedding revolution, as you say, and we get to support one another and to take good care of ourselves. And how can people learn even more about all the many programs that you offer, all of these tools and tips? How can they engage with you?
If you go to actually kathydempsey.com, KATHYDEMPSEY.com, there's lots of resources on the actual website. But one that I'm going to offer you free for being here today and watching this is the second little project this year was 52 Questions book, the COVID edition. Now, we've had other editions, but this one's COVID. So it gives you 52 questions that you can ask yourself, like, what's been the biggest losses? What's been the most unexpected blessings? How have your relationships changed? And it goes through 52 questions. And we have leaders throughout the United States that are using these books to help facilitate their staff meetings. They're giving them to their employees to say, hey, go home and fill this out and talk to your spouse or family about it. It starts these amazing conversations to help people process what in the world is going on here during this most significant time of most of our lives that we've ever seen. So I'm going to put this on a private link page on my website just for you all to download the file for a limited time. So after you watch this, and I'm sure we'll get the link up of exactly where you need to go to that private page, you can download that file, and I hope it helps you help to process and help others. Share it with as many people as you can that you think could benefit for this, as we're going through a great time of shedding in our lives.
Once again, Kathy, really a whole lot of love to you and the wonderful work that you do in our world. And I'm so deeply grateful that you didn't take those pills all those years ago.
I'm glad to be here and be able to talk about it, but it wasn't because it wasn't because I had the skills, because somebody rescued me, which I thank God that they did, because it would have been a tragedy.
And perhaps, Kathy, with your words today, perhaps you've done exactly the same for somebody listening. I would imagine a whole bunch of somebody's listening. So thank you.
Thank you. That's my hope and my prayer.